Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we're playing Green-Black Turbodepths, but not as we know it. We're trying out Faulted Forms build, which is a little bit different to what I've been playing lately, because it jams in 4 Orcish Bowmasters. The rest of the deck is more or less as you'd expect, so let's just quickly go over it for anyone who's new here. Dark Depths makes a 20/20 when it has no counters. Hexmage removes all counters from opponent, so that gives you a 20/20. Thespian stage becomes a copy of Dark Depths, except it doesn't come in with the counters, so you end up with a 20/20. So that's how we're winning the game 99% of the time, probably even more than 99% of the time. In order to facilitate this, we have fast mana over here, we have a bunch of tutors here, and we have protection pieces like Not of This World and Pithing Needle, which can stop various things, whether it's Karakas, whether it's Wastelands, or Maze of Iths, or whatever. We can kind of cover them with these sorts of things, or removal spells, like Swords of Plowshares. We've got a bunch of hand disruptors. We've got 6 pieces of hand disruption, Thoughtseize and Duress. And this particular build is opting for 4 Orcish Bowmasters. This is just a really powerful card in the meta right now. It doesn't really work towards our plan, so I'm curious to see how it plays. Obviously, Faulted Form is a player who gets some reasonable success across numerous different decks, so it's definitely worth trying out something that they've had success with. But the deck more or less just looks exactly as you'd expect. So we've got ourselves a few Silver Bullet lands. So we've got a Boseiju we can find with our Scrying to blow some stuff up. We've got the Bojuka Bog, we've got the Sejiri Steppe, we've got the Ghost Quarter. You know, everything that you'd expect to see here. If you're interested in this deck and this archetype, I have lots of content about this on my Patreon. So by all means, go ahead and have a look over there. The link is in the description. Sideboard-wise, we've got Abrupt Decay. It's just the most flexible tool of dealing with all the problems, whether that's Opposition Agent, Blood Moon, Mages of the Moon, Ensnaring Bridge, whatever. We got Graveyard Hate and Leyline in the Void and Surgical. We have an Apostle's Blessing, which allows us to swing through artifact creatures off of something like the 4-mana Necron card from the Warhammer 40k set that makes a whole bunch of flying artifact creatures. This allows you to get through it. It can also be a protection piece as well. Same with Tamiyo Safekeeping, which protects not only your creatures but also your lands because it's target permanent. So you can use this to stop a wasteland, for example. And we have 1 Karakas, which I'm personally not a fan of in these sorts of decks. Usually when you're trying to find the Karakas, you're using a piece that would help you win the game. I think Karakas is more justifiable with an Elvish Reclaimer build, because you have more tutors effectively there. But we've got one here anyway, so we can board it in if we got some other stuff that's not going to be doing anything for us anyway. And we have a couple of Sphere Resistance as our sort of anti-combo card, along with some Veil of Summer, which can protect us from scamming type stuff, as well as Tendrils of Agony being pointed at our face for a bunch. And yeah, that's the deck. So let's see what this looks like, really. Remember to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. And let's start jamming with Faulted Forms Turbodepths build. If you're looking to play Legacy on MTGO like me, why not try Card Hoarder? They're a rental service that I personally use, and I found them better than other rental services that I've used in the past. So why not give them a try? So our opening hand for game 1 is this Orcish Bowmasters doesn't really help us towards our plan. I don't think we can just keep Thoughtseize Orcish Bowmasters here, especially without a green source. So we're going to send this one back. This is kind of similar problems but different, so we'll send this one back as well. This doesn't look great, but at least we have the green mana. Is Orcish Bowmasters good enough to keep here? I guess we'll try it. So we probably want this Urborg, this Pithing Needle, this Bayou. So 2 cards. I guess we're going to get rid of the 2 petals here. Not amazingly happy with this hand. But we have less tutors to draw to than I'm used to, which means we can find ourselves in a little bit of hot water with keeping hands. A Grief. Yeah, this is going to get pretty awkward for us pretty quickly. So this looks like classic red-black Reanimator. So we're probably seeing some amount of things come into play this turn from our opponent's side. They could just strip all of our action this turn and kill us. And it turns out it doesn't really matter what we kept, because we were pretty much stone cold to what they had anyway. Entomb. Are they going to Lotus Petal Reanimate? Gone for Grizzlebrand. So if we'd have kept the... Actually, no, we didn't have anything we could do here. Our opponent just gets to go. If they reanimate this Grizzlebrand, I'm happy to... Yeah, okay. I'm happy to scoop that one up. Alright, so Graveyard Hate. Let's have some of that. So the red-black Reanimator deck tends to have access to the Mages of the Moon. So this is definitely something to think about. Veil of Summer is also potentially useful, but not super impressive. Pithing Needle, yes, I can stop Grizzlebrand, but I don't think that's how we're best off fighting against this sort of matchup. We don't really need Not of This World here either. That leaves us trying to find 2 more things here. So obviously the Bojuka Bog is pretty nice. This isn't really a Ghost Quarter matchup, so you can take that out. And then we have one more thing to try and find. I guess we could always just go down on Veil of Summers, because they're not always going to be that good. We could always go down on some fast mana. We definitely want to keep the Sejiri Steppe. Bojuka Bog is part of our actual mana base because it casts our green spells, so we can't really board that one out. So what could we board out? The only things I think we can realistically board out here would be a piece of fast mana. Although the piece of fast mana can help us get through the Mages of the Moon. But I think we can probably trim one and see how this fares. It's either this or not having 2 Veils. But we'll try like this. I guess we keep the double Leyline hand. We've got this. We just need to find one of the other combo pieces. We already have the other combo piece here. We just need mana. We can keep this one. It has the interaction we want. And we will play both because they're unlikely to have a thing that blows them. But actually, is that true? They can probably have... I think we play out the Dark Depths now because we have another one anyway. So if we only play out one, what are we doing with the other one is the real answer there. So they could have something like Wear Tear. But they might have the 2 mana thing that blows up all the artifacts and enchantments. Serenity. So this is why we did this. So we can do this. We can crop rotate this Dark Depths away for a Thespian stage. And then all we need to find here is mana. Lotus Petal from our opponent. Faith is Looting. Alright, we're going to keep their Exile Zone popped out here because we get to see what they've gone through and discarded, so we can get a better feel about what they might have in their hand. So we're trying to dodge something like Show and Tell, really. Alright, our opponent's just had enough. We have some sequencing that we need to decide with this hand as well. In terms of, we could play the Dark Depths, because then if we draw an Urborg, we just get to go. But if we play the Bojuka Bog, that gets a tap land out of the way for later. But anyway, it didn't matter in the end. So, what are we up to now? Any changes? Like, this Spirit Guide is probably better than a Lotus Petal for the purposes of Veil of Summer. Because we get to do this on turn 0 potentially. So, we'll swap around the fast mana we're removing there. We do just want to have a little bit of Graveyard Hate to begin with. It's been a hot minute since I played against classic Red-Black Reanimator. Nice to see people still jamming it. What does this hand do? We lose to turn 1 anything, and we're pretty slow in terms of getting ourselves up and running, so I think we can do better than this. Our opponent's begun with a full grip over there. Does this beat turn 1 reanimation spell? They've got 7 cards. How do we beat a 7-card hand? We need to have a hand that has redundancy, or has something like a Leyline. I think we just... what does this do? This. Nope. Alright, let's go to 4. No Leyline here. No way of playing this Veil. I think we're just going to Leyline here and just mulling to Oblivion. Alright, so we can keep this. We need to keep a Bayou. To keep this Leyline. I think we get rid of this Thoughtseize, this Bowmasters, and 2 more cards have got to go. We could just have more Graveyard Hate. That's probably going anyway. I think we just keep the thing that does something towards our combo plan here. This isn't a great start for us. But our opponent kept 7. If they had gone to 5 or something, then we could maybe do something a bit differently. But we didn't find any Graveyard Hate. And we will lose if we don't have Graveyard Hate, because that's what the Black-Red Reanimator does. It very consistently reanimates something on turn 1 or 2. But I have to imagine if they kept a 7, it's got to be a 7 that can probably deal with the Leyline. Because they've already seen it in game 2. Alright, our opponent's cracking a Verdant Catacombs. Faith is Looting. Let's see what goes away. Now, we're going to need to find quite a few things to actually win this game. So our opponent's got a lot of time to assemble what they're doing. And we've only got 7 tutors in our deck. Whereas the main list I'm running at the moment has 12 tutors. But we do have Orcish Bowmasters, which can just do stuff. Okay, they're bidding a Serenity. That suggests to me that they have another Serenity. That's the only reason why you get rid of that in this situation. Or they just have a Show and Tell, and they are happy to do that. Right, so let's Thoughtseize our opponent. See if we can take that Serenity that we think they've got. They don't have the Serenity, but they do have the Show and Tell, like I said they might do. So we have to take the Show and Tell, because things get pretty bad for us if they Show and Tell in a big monster. Now, I'm very surprised they got rid of the Serenity as well. Like, I think they're better off getting rid of the Grief there. Right, so Lotus Petal and Swamp gone. Another Lotus Petal. So we're just going to see a hard cast Grief here, and then we're going to lose our Scrying. And then we're going to get slowly beaten down by this Grief. Yep. Okay. We're going to need some good rips here. We did go to 3, so it's not looking amazing for us. Alright, we have a card that doesn't do anything. Our opponent has 6 turns of wailing on us, and then we die. There's a Scrubland. So we still have perfect information of our opponent's hand. We don't have any Surveil lands to get with this Verdant Catacombs. Alright, we just take another 3. The crack in the Verdant Catacombs doesn't take anything off the clock. Alright, we'll crack this. We'll just get a Bayou. We're just slowly thinning our deck out. We don't have any like cantrips that we want to shuffle after, like Brainstorm or anything like that. So we're just changing the percentages by like a tenth of a percent or something. But it's mathematically correct to do. We'll play out our permanent here so it doesn't get discarded. And then we'll pass. So if we find like something like a Sylvan Scrying, we can just fire that off and get a Dark Depths, because we have to play around discard hitting us, so we have to make a choice of what land we get. We can't just hold on to it. Whereas if we get a crop rotation, we can hold on to it, and then if they discard us, then we can do it in response. Alright. Okay. We're 1 card away, but our opponent is going to kill us in 3 turns. Blue to Delta. And our opponent's end step, I'll turn Thespian stage into a swamp. That makes it a basic land for the purposes of any sort of... It's unlikely they have a wasteland, but it means we have something that we can play around Blood Moon with, if that's the thing we require. An Urborg, is that useful? It's better in play than it is in our hand, so... Alright, we have 1 more turn of our opponent hitting us here, then we basically need to draw Bowmasters to deal with this grief. Because no longer will the 2020 be good enough. But if we didn't have any graveyard hate, we would have lost to our opponent's hand. So we did have to mulligan to the 3 to not die to our opponent's hand there. Alright, Orcish Bowmasters, it's your time to shine. Can you buy us many more draw steps? They're pretty close to hard casting this Archon of Cruelty, to be honest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, okay, they're just doing it now. Yeah, we're dead. Yeah, we just didn't really get there on that one. That's unfortunate. Alright, let's go to round 2. Alright, so we're on the play. This hand does work for us, so we'll keep this. And we can begin with an Urborg, and we can fire off a Thoughtseize. And that's better than just firing this Sylvan Scrying into the blind, although against opposing hand disruption, just playing the Petal and Scrying is the better play. But against a lot of decks, it won't be, so we are correct to do this. Also makes Vampire Hexmage a better draw. Alright, Brazen Borrower is one of the few cards we care about here, so we will take that away from our opponent. Next turn, we can Sylvan Scrying. We're trying to dodge Wastelands here. So we're going to see the Channeler, I'm almost certain of it. Yep. There's a little guy. Another Dark Depths, that's not really what we wanted. We could, if we play out the Depths and the Scrying this turn. So we can do this, this, and then cast a Scrying. Whilst we know it's quite likely that this resolves because I didn't have any disruption in hand. And this means we get our Dark Depths into play for later. And if they waste down this one, we've got a redundant one anyway, so it just slows us down a turn. It doesn't stop us from comboing altogether. The Devil matchup generally is pretty much what you want to see when you play Turbodepths. It's one of the more favourable matchups. Although we only have the 3 Pithing Needles rather than the 4 and the 75. But we've got these Tamiyos Safekeeping, which are pretty useful too. Right, another Channeler. Alright, a Bauble. That's given them some pretty good selection. But we know the cards in our opponent's hand right now. And the chances of them having more than 1 Brazen Borrower are pretty slim, but not impossible. You see 1 to 2 in these decks. So are they going to target themselves? No, they're going to target us. Yes, because they know what's on top of their library. That makes sense. So they can crack for 1 here. They didn't crack for 1. So now we play out this Thespian stage, and in our opponent's upkeep will make the guys to dodge things like Wasteland. They left a card on top though. But it could just be a cantrip. Alright, yep, they're scooping it up. So this build with just the Questing Druids sometimes runs Magus of the Moon, so we definitely want some access to some Abrupt Decays. Tamiyo's Safekeeping for protection against Wasteland potentially is interesting. Also stops against Borrower. That's something we're kind of interested in. Bojuka Bog isn't actually necessary in this matchup. Yes, they use their graveyard, but if we're playing the game around getting a Bojuka Bog, I'm not really having a good time. Is usually how that goes. Not of this world isn't the most important thing. So we can trim on that. And if we're taking Tamiyo's Safekeeping, that's kind of like protection from Wasteland and protection from Borrower at the same time. And the 2 life is pretty clutch too. So we're going to try these instead of Not of This World. It is slower because this is going to cost us mana. But this matchup is one where you usually get a fair bit of time. It's not that often they just do the really quick bopping. They need to have some interaction usually. So this opening hand doesn't really play. We don't have any green mana, so we're going to send this one back. This one has similar problems. So we have some green mana. Have the Pithing Needle, which is kind of clutch here. I don't think I want to go lower than this. We don't get to play the Thoughtseize with this hand. We don't get to play the Abrupt Decay either. So what are we doing? Probably Thespian stage, Pithing Needle. We can play around days if we have to. I don't really like that though. We'll see what our opponent does here. A Brainstorm. Orcish Bowmasters, why are you in my hand and not in play? That'd be so much better. Can I have this? Right, if they're days in that, that means they have a wasteland usually. So I will pay for this. Now that is our only green source gone. But we're not going to beat them if they have a wasteland. And if they didn't have wastelands, they'd be a lot less likely to daze there. And they save it more for like a Hexmage or a Tutor. Alright, Scalding Tarn. Cracking a Scalding Tarn. So we know they've got a Vault in hand as well. But they wanted to crack that one to shuffle away the cards from the Brainstorm. Or one of the cards from the Brainstorm. I'd very much like to find a green mana source. A Bayou would be a lovely draw. A Dark Depths. Okay. Well, we have a lot of good draws. So, any green source is great. A black source is fine. An Urborg is a 2020. Now, our opponent may have a Brazen Borrower. Alright, that doesn't do anything for us, so we're shipping the turn again. But our opponent isn't putting us under any pressure just yet. Delver of Secrets, there's some pressure. Black source just to cast this Bowmasters would be pretty nice. Not a black source to cast the Bowmasters. Understood. But we are one mana source away from attempting a 2020. Let's see what the Delver of Secrets finds. A land or a creature or an artifact, most likely. Alright, so we're going to take one from this Delver. There's a Wasteland. An Elvish Spirit Guide. So we could use this to try and cast the Sylvan Scrying, or we could use it on the Dark Depths. If we try and cast the Sylvan Scrying and they counter it, what does that mean for us? That means we're back to just trying to draw a land again. But if they don't counter it, we can then get an Urborg, play an Urborg, have Dark Depths up, or Bowmasters. So I think this works out better. We can play around a daze, a Spell Pierce, sure. We don't get to pay for that one. But we're in a similar position where we were last turn. We've got a lot of lands in our deck. And mana, if we draw them, we get to try and go again. Or we can try and go for this. Like, the most we're going to be taking this turn is 3. Alright, I guess we're... Okay, so they didn't like the top cards. They're shuffling just a little bit of scry action with their Delver rather than beating us for 3 this turn, which is nice. Alright, so they have Hardcast Force of Will mana over there. I think the only reason you would play out that land is if you have the Hardcast Force of Will. So this makes me think that we don't want to try... Oh no, okay, maybe they don't have the Hardcast Force of Will. This is going to be a Murktide. But they're still holding open the Brazen Borrower mana, which doesn't make me feel great, but they're kind of putting us in a position where we're going to have to go soon anyway, if we can. Tamiyo's Safekeeping, that is not the one, is it? So we might be punished for that Sylvan Scrying line. But our opponent has been playing like they have the Borrower. Now that could just be a really potent bluff from our opponent, but the way they've always been leaving open the Borrower mana means it's kind of expected for them to have it. So we take 7, 8, 9, 10 this turn, which means Lightning Bolt kills us even if we make a 2020 next turn. So things not looking great for us. If we had a Yawgmoth, that would be pretty good. But this build doesn't have a Yawgmoth, so we don't get to do that. Because the Yawgmoth would allow us to Tamiyo Safekeeping. Okay, so that's the Lightning Bolt. So they bash us for 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, they got another Murktide. Yeah, okay. You skipped that, that's just lethal. So maybe we get away with it. It looks like they didn't actually have it, or they brainstormed it back in that turn. But they might have had it. So are we supposed to do anything differently here? I think someone like Not This World would have made me feel safer in those sorts of spots. And I think we're kind of feeling the downside of this particular build has less lands than I would normally play. I would normally have a Yawgmoth and a second Boseiju to play with. But we don't have those today. Which means the green on this is actually a lot more difficult to cast. So maybe we are supposed to have Not of This World instead. So let's try that. Makes us slightly worse versus Wasteland, but better against Borrower. Okay, so this kind of has it all, but we can get a little bit jammed up by various things. I will keep this one, and I'm going to lead out on the Thespian stage. This is probably the land that we can afford to get wastelanded the most, I think, here. Like, the Orcish Bowmasters should just do a ton of work against our opponent. We don't want the Dark Depths because we have less copies of that, effectively, because the stage and the Hexmage both count as the other side of our combo. Our opponent is targeting themselves so they can see if they want to play a fetch land or not, which means we're less likely to get wastelanded here. Okay, so now we can play this Urborg and do some Orcish Bowmaster fun times. Not right now, obviously, because we don't have the second land. But we can try and ping down one of our opponent's threats. Or we can try and mess with their draw step. Or not their draw step, their draws from cards. So it doesn't hit the first card. Right, so this is the Ponder. We will try and mess with our opponent here. This isn't actually worth fighting over for our opponent because this isn't the thing that matters. But I'm okay for this to eat a counterspell. So they've already played land for the turn, so they're not getting wastelanded this turn. Let's see where they put this Ponder. They shuffled their library. Okay. That makes me more inclined to go for a combo next turn. So we can go now and try and dodge wasteland. I think that is worth doing. We do have another land, so we can just start Sylvan Scrying and getting back to the combo anyway. Or jamming a Bowmasters and trying to disrupt our opponent. Alright, our opponent just doesn't have it there. So yeah. Delver decks are a good matchup. They don't really interact with you in ways that are particularly helpful, to be honest with you. The Bowmasters forced a little bit of action from the days. We didn't really need to do that. It did slow our opponent down for a turn by making them bounce a land. However, so basically that just means they wouldn't be able to cast like a Ponder and try and find a thing this turn. So it might have made a difference there. Alright, let's go to round 3. This opening hand can attempt a turn 3 combo. So I think that's worth keeping. We against another Delver player? We're going to see something a bit spicier. A Ponder. We will not know this turn. Unless they start playing out some like Lotus Petals or something. Then we'll know they're in Spice Town. Rather than good old fashioned Delver. Our hand is actually not amazing against Delver. So we're mainly going to be using our crop rotations like counterspells for Wasteland. Until we can poke a hole with some disruption. Or if we're forced into it. Right, I'm going to play this. I'm going to crack this now for a Bayou. We don't want to get messed up by a Stifle. And this way, if they do try and wasteland us, we can then crop rotate. This way, if they counter, it's just a 2 for 2. So that trade is much better for us than if we try and crop rotate in the blind. So they've still got some blue mana over there, so they might be seeing... Alright, they've got a little friend. So we now have to consider what we're playing around next. Are we playing around another wasteland, or are we playing around counter magic? Because we could go in our turn, so we play around Dazes, but that still plays into Force of Wills. Or we could crop rotate in response to a potential wasteland. Okay, that's interesting. Alright, I think we're just going to play out this Urborg then. And just go for the Hexmage next turn. If that doesn't work, we can then try and follow up with crop rotations. We should have enough time. Delver is unlikely to be killing us in a few turns. Alright, a Stifle. That's a big one to reveal. So that will definitely impact how good our Hexmage can be. We can certainly buy them a turn as well. If we just play out this Hexmage, they have to keep up the mana the whole time. But that's the thing they can do. Is it worth taxing our opponent? I think so. Because we have a couple of crop rots that we can fire off afterwards. If this Hexmage resolves, they don't get to crack their fetch unless they play another land first. Right, so there's the other land. We're going to get bashed for 3 here. There is a ball. They target themselves, they can get the shuffle. They are. I think we made a mistake that turn as well. I think we had the option to Bowmaster in response to that bauble. But I kind of want to see what we drew in case we had something that helped us out. Alright, let's strip this graveyard out so our opponent can't make their guy. No Murktide, please. This is not worth stifling for our opponent. So now the pressure we can put with the Bowmasters should be an annoying one. And could actually end up being suitable removal for any threats they may have. Like a Dragon's Rage Channeler. Or if they cast a Ponder, we can fire off this Bowmasters in response. A Wasteland. Well, that's terrible news. In comes the Insectile Aberration. We're always going to get another Dark Depths with our crop rotation anyway. I think I will play this Bowmasters though. So we can ping our opponent for 1. And then we can crack for 4. So our clock is not as good as our opponent still. But this will shut off some of their cards. So they could stifle and wasteland us here. I think if they wasteland us, we just let it go. It's not worth losing our Hexmage when we have 2 crop rotations in hand. And we do have to resolve these crop rotations. Yep, we just let that go. Yeah, if we'd have played this Bowmasters in response to the Bauble trigger, we could have pinged down this Insectile Aberration, or at least forced some action out of our opponent. A daze, that's pretty good too. Yep, that's a good time for our opponent to fetch because we're shields down over here. We haven't got anything that we can use to really impact the game. And this gets their land out for them. So they're not restricted by timings if we were just to play another Dark Depths. So we're probably playing this Verdant Catacombs. And we're going to have to try and get around our opponent's Stifle. Could be a tricky one. A Bowmasters. Alright. So if they ping our Hexmage, as they should do, we get to activate our Hexmage here. This will stop them from getting a token, which is something. Not of this world. It's not the one we want, really, is it? I'll crack this now whilst our opponent is shields down over there. And I'm playing around another wasteland. I think we're just going to pass and we can cycle this Bojuka Bog. And then the turn after, we can try and win the game. Or at least make it 2020. It's about as close to winning the game as we're going to get. But this Stifle is just going to beat us, I think. There's not much we can do about it. Can I have crop rotation, please? We can. Interesting. We'll take the Dark Depths. That means if we draw a Hexmage, we've got a little bit more out. Hexmage can block this, and then we can try and make a guy. A Not of This World. Well, we have a play. It's hope that our opponent doesn't know how their card works. Or maybe they'll stifle the wrong thing. Because a lot of people don't stifle the right thing when it comes to Dark Depths. Are we doing this in the upkeep? I think we are. So I'll probably float off of this. Send away the Swamp. Thespian stage. Now we have the Brazen Borrower beat here. Let's see if our opponent knows how to use their Stifle in this situation. This is the thing they should stifle. Yeah, and our opponent's correctly identified that. Sometimes people try and stifle the Make a 2020 trigger, but then it just goes back on the stack as soon as I get priority again because it checks to see if there's any counters on it. There aren't any counters on it. We carry on. So Lightning Bolt finishes off here, but next turn we can't deal with both of their guys because we're at 1. Bowmasters doesn't do it because we don't have the mana to activate our Thespian stage and Bowmasters. We don't have Tamiyo's Safekeeping, which still wouldn't be enough anyway. A Bowmasters, we can ping this down, but it's not going to get us anywhere. Unless our opponent makes a mistake and draws a card. If our opponent casts a Ponder before attacking, then we can win this game. But our opponent shouldn't do anything, they should just attack. There's a Wasteland. It's a pretty good one. And they didn't cast anything. Sure, we're dead. Alright, let's go to the sideboard. So, Decay's in. Although, our opponent was the black build, so they don't really have the things that we're actually bringing the Decays for. They don't have Magus of the Moon effects. So these are less important. The Tamiyo Safekeeping, just having more copies of Not of This World is probably nice. Kind of want to board out with Bojuka Bog, but I am worried about how few lands we have. But alright, let's take it out. It's not really a land, is it? It's a spell. And then we can take out... It's better to take out a surprise piece of mana here, probably. The thing about the Petal is it helps us cast Hexmage, whereas Elvish Spirit Guide is surprise mana our opponent doesn't know about. I don't think we need all of these Not of This Worlds, though. Let's trim on these. I don't think we want the Decays necessarily. Like, it's the Grixis build, so they shouldn't be having Magus of the Moon. Yes, we can start decaying some of their guys, and sometimes that comes up, because sometimes you get to decay a blocker and then swing through. I'm going to try out these Tamiyo Safekeeping. Okay, this one has got some gas to it. So we want to fire off the Sylvan Scrying before our opponent has access to Daze. But we're in a bit of a bind as to what we get with it. I would probably need to get a Bayou for the purposes of our Hexmage here. Alright, so we've got Sylvan Scrying. So the Dark Depths is the thing we always need. But Dark Depths doesn't help us cast the next Sylvan Scrying here. So I think we're supposed to get the Thespian stage. That's the more cautious play here. The Dark Depths play is the let's get the thing that wins us the game, and then we'll figure out the rest in a bit. The fact that this is a come and play tap land really sucks for us. There's a pretty sizable inflection point here. The amount of time we're taking on this tells our opponent that we either have the combo rolled up and are looking for something else, or we're deciding which one to take, so we don't have them. We don't have one or the other. All right, I think we're going to get the Dark Depths and roll high here. Like, Sejiri Steppe can be crop rotation fodder anyway. Volcanic Island, you're going to see a threat? We are. Okay. That's what our opponent wanted to see. I'm not going to risk this into... right, it's just Sejiri Steppe. I'm not going to risk this into a crop rotation. But I can risk the Sejiri Steppe into a crop rotation. Or we can just fire off a Sylvan Scrying. There's a Polluted Delta from our opponent. So we've got some lines available to us here. We could crop rotate at end step, but that plays into days. We could crop rotate in our turn, which plays around days, or we could Sejiri Steppe in our turn. Sorry, not Sejiri Steppe, Sylvan Scrying. Another Channeler. I think we're just going to go to our turn and play this a little bit slower. Alright, so we found the Urborg. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? So we can play the Urborg. If we Sylvan Scrying here, this might force some action from our opponent. And next turn we have Hexmage into Hexmage. Right, so we're going to get Thespian stage here. So we have our combo. We don't have protection because the Sejiri Steppe is in play, so this crop rotation is not going to help us on that front. Our opponent didn't play anything there. So I'm getting Brazen Borrower vibes over there. It's going to be a little bit tricky for us to answer unless we draw one of our key bits. But I don't know if we have enough. Okay, so there's the Wasteland. That's not the one we want. Blue, blue. A counterbalance. What are they going to put this on? If they can. Okay, they milled a Murktide. They're not using this Wasteland yet. Which suits us, I believe. They want to save it for our combo, which is understandable. They don't know what our hand is, so... Interesting. Okay, let's go for a Hexmage. Let's see what you got over there, opponent. You put a 2 on top. A Force of Will. That means there isn't a 2 on top. They're going to reveal this to give us some free information? Probably not. Put it as Thespian stage rather than leaving our Dark Depths hanging around. We've got a crop rotation and a Tamiyo's Safekeeping to utilise here. We kind of need to keep our green source open for the purposes of the Tamiyo's Safekeeping. We only have the one green source really. And we're not likely to find more. Right, so they're milling away. What are they going to put on top? I think they're quite likely to put another 2 on top to stop Hexmage. But they know that we have the combo sewn up through other means. So maybe they're not going to. Maybe they'll put a Murktide on top to stop Not of This World. That'd be pretty savage. We can risk it all with a Safekeeping if we want to. By just doing the combo with our lands. And then if they try and blow up, we Tamiyo Safekeeping. Still only 1/1s though. So we can try this out before exposing our Dark Depths. A Delver of Secrets. So we know our Tamiyo Safekeeping won't work. That is interesting. So the Wasteland does beat us here. Oh no, they're just going for this now. That's interesting. So the reason they're doing this is because they've worked out we can just play a Dark Depths and go here. So that suggests to me they don't have a Brazen Borrower. But why would they do that like that? So interesting. Okay. So in our opponent's draw step, we're going to make this after they've drawn the Delver, because then we know our Tamiyo Safekeeping is more likely to be online. Slightly unusual time with our opponent's choice of that Wasteland there. So now we know they've drawn the Delver, we can make this around Wasteland. We know our opponent has Stifle, but we can't really do much about it. We know the top card of their library isn't 1 right now. Obviously, channelers can fix things up pretty easily. But the way they Wastelanded there made me think they didn't have... They want to exile this stage, but I have a stage in hand. Oh well. This is somewhat awkward. So now they also know what we've got in hand to protect. So they're way more likely to... Oh, they put the Brainstorm in the graveyard. Huh. Maybe they've already got a counter spell. Yep. Goodbye. Thespian stage in our hand. Stifle here would suck. Don't want them to have that. Alright, we just get to win the game. I was going to float some mana off of this and then have Tamiyo Safekeeping around days right there. But yeah, we got it. 2 Devil matchups, 2 wins. Take it. We played for a lot of stuff. I was very curious why they did that Wasteland. Now, we kind of had it covered with Safekeeping, potentially, but it does become a little bit awkward still. But but they were putting enough pressure that we had to think about going. But we got there. So let's go to round 4. We are 2-1. Oh, sorry. No, we're not. We've got another round to play. Another game to play here. Whoops. Oh dear. Sorry, opponent. We're just going to go back in again. I thought we won the first game there, but we didn't, did we? My bad. I was too sucked into that one to remember what happened before it. So we have one of those hands where it's, do we think Orcish Bowmasters is going to be a good card here? And I'm not sure what the answer to that one is. I think it'll be fine. Like, Thoughtseize into Bowmasters is alright, but it doesn't get us towards the way that we actually win the game. And we could try a Bowmasters, but it might not end up doing very much. I think we're better off trying to mulligan towards our plan. Like this, for example. And if we throw back one of these Verdant Catacombs, we can play turn 1, Pithing Needle on Wasteland, turn 2, Dark Depths, possibly Hexmage if we want to. We might want to wait one more turn to play around Days. We're going to see the one-off Thoughtseize that these Grixis decks sometimes play. No. Right, just a Delver. Alright. If we draw fast mana, we can go on turn 2 around a Days, like that. Okay, so let's play this. Pithing Needle. A Force of Will. Okay, opponent. Bit mean, but I understand. What are you going to get off your Delver here? Please don't flip a Stifle. No flip. Okay. Don't draw a Wasteland, I guess? They might already have the Wasteland in hand. It's going to be a second main phase Wasteland. It's interesting they got rid of a Brainstorm for their Force of Will. That probably means they have like another cantrip or just like absolute gas in hand already. Yep, okay, so they had another cantrip in hand. So now I can set the Delver up for next turn, possibly find a Wasteland right now. Not a Wasteland. Potentially a Stifle, though. So this is awkward, because we can't cast the Thoughtseize right now. And the best card is probably going to be on top of our opponent's library, unless they're just trying to fix up their hand. So it's kind of a tough call here. We could just jam the Hexmage, playing around Days. But that plays into Stifle quite badly. How many Stifles is our opponent likely to have? It's going to be 1 or 2. If we Thoughtseize right now, I think that's honestly fine. We'll play out our Verdant Catacombs, and then I think we're going to Thoughtseize our opponent. It's a little bit slower than I would have liked to play this one, but the pressure under isn't a lot right now, and there are some cards that can definitely jam us up. Okay, so they do have a Wasteland. Murktide Regent is more annoying here than Bowmasters, I feel, but Bowmasters can ping our little friend down. Yeah, if we'd have just gone for it there, we'd have been alright. Now we're going to get rocked by this Wasteland that they sandbagged. Interesting. I guess we take the Bowmasters. Incentivize our opponents to tap out more. Right, so they shuffled, they found a Daze. Okay, that's not a thing we mind about. So they're going to play the Wasteland this turn, I presume. We're going to lose by playing around Stifle. Could be. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they could play a Wasteland and crack it to play the Murktide this turn. I think we're supposed to crack the... If we crack this now, our opponent is way more likely to Wasteland our green source. We're trying to bait our opponent into wasting this in the main phase and then playing the Murktide. They didn't take it. Okay. How are we going to beat this Wasteland? That is a difficult ask, isn't it? We'll play out a Petal. Play out Hexmage. We could play out the Depths. We do risk them drawing a second Wasteland if we do that. The upside is if we draw a Thespian stage next turn, it's a lot easier to go. So I think we have to just play into us winning the game. Oh, we shouldn't have played around Stifle. We just had it. And now we're going to lose because of it, I think. Crop Rotation is a fine draw here. As is just the Ghost Quarter that's in our deck. Tamiyo Safekeeping is fine. A Pithing Needle is fine. We've got a lot of draws that get us out of this spot. A Sylvan Scrying. This works, doesn't it? So we cast this for this and this mana. We're going to get the Ghost Quarter. We deploy the Ghost Quarter. In our opponent's upkeep, we Ghost Quarter their Wasteland. Oh yeah, I'll attack. I guess the one thing that could get us here would be an Orcish Bowmasters in our opponent's hand. That would jam us up a bunch. But I don't think we should be playing around that. Alright, so let's hit this Wasteland. If they cast an Orcish Bowmasters here, we will lose, I think. Stifle, also pretty bad. Alright. So now we have Not of This World paying around some permission. A Delver of Secrets. 2 cards left in our opponent's hand. One of them is a Murktide Regent. I suspect they're holding back their Delver to block. rather than just sending it into the big wall that is Marit Lage. Their plan from here is probably going to be to race us until they find the thing they need. So block with this, next turn they play a Murktide, block with this, try and bash and finish us off with some more creatures if possible. I'll play this Dark Depths. It gives us more mana to play around things like Spell Pierces. What are you going to reveal to Delve of Secrets? Nothing. Okay, so the Murktide Regent has to go under the bus this turn. Right, so this is going to get gobbled up by our massive technical monster. Attack is correct. We'll remove a counter from our Dark Depths. Okay, that's not too shabby, is it? Alright, let's attack with the Indestructible Man. In you come. Opponent's got 3 cards in hand. We'll jam this other Hexmage. Alright, opponent. You need to flip your Delver and block with it. Or have a Brazen Borrower, but Brazen Borrower doesn't even win on the board, let alone the card we have in hand. Opponent's drawn their card. What dastardly horror does our opponent have in store for us? I will play out my land, just gives us more mana to pay around stuff our opponent can have here. I'll attack with just the Marit Lage. Can find a Borrower? They did. I would like to cast a Not of This World. And if this doesn't work for us, we have another 2020 ready and waiting to go. Alright, we win the game. So, a lot of interesting stuff happened in that match. So, we tried to play around, well, in this particular game actually, we tried to play around a Stifle when we could have gone. Because we saw the Stifle in the previous game. If we hadn't seen that Stifle, I'd be less inclined to do that. And we did see the Stifle in game 1 and 2, if I remember rightly. So, the fact is, we didn't have that much pressure coming at us. And our deck is so good in this matchup that we can afford to play around some minor outs. Because if we were to go for it and they stifled us, then we'd be so far behind. Whereas we slowed ourselves down a turn. Yes, they have more bits and pieces, but we have lots of tools to get it. Like I said, we had the Pithing Needle, we had the Crop Rotation, we had the Sylvan Scrying, the Ghost Core itself. So we did have ways of getting around it. And as you can see, this matchup is pretty solid. Alright, this time we will actually go to round 4, not like I said halfway through this round. Alright, round 4, let's go. This hand has a lot of interaction. You know, we can Thoughtseize, we can Duress, we can protect our creature, but we're going to need to find a little bit of help here. I think this is acceptable though. Underground Soothe my opponent. Are we just going to get backed with a bunch of stuff like Griefs and things? No. A Ponder. Could be Doomsday, could be Rescaminator, could be regular Scam, could be Grixis Delver, could be Ninjas. There's a whole lot of options it could be. Could be 4-color control, 5-color control, Grixis control. There's a lot of decks playing Underground Sea Ponder right now. That's what I'm saying. They didn't shuffle, so they found something they like. A Thoughtseize. Alright, let's Thoughtseize our opponent and see if we can get a feel for what they're up to. Baleful Strix, Ponder, Orcish Bowmasters. Don't care about these cards. We're going to take the Ponder. I think we're more likely to want our Lotus Petal in play, because our opponent can have hand disruption of their own, more than being able to blow this up. I'm not expecting white mana off of our opponent. They could have it though, it could be like an Esper Flash sort of deck. With Baleful Strix, which doesn't have Flash, but you know what I mean? Like Esper Vial-ish. Okay, no, we are Grixis control. And they're playing out the Strix, that's fine. The Death Touch doesn't really impact us, because our creature is indestructible. This is getting a little bit annoying for us. We could Sylvan Scrying right now and play it out, but do I think our opponent is a Wasteland deck? I don't believe the Grixis control deck has Wastelands in. Stryfopile does, but with 2 swamps in our opponent's deck, I don't believe they're playing Wastelands, so I'm going to make an educated guess based on what we've seen and go for this. So we're going to get ourselves the Dark Depths, and we will play the Dark Depths. This opens up possibilities for Black Land next turn, allowing us to go off. Shoulder's Edict is something our opponent can have to mess with us. If we find an Urborg, then we get to duress our opponent and then go for it. Alright, Ponder is very good for our opponent there. Right, one of their many swamps. I think we're going to take 1 point of damage from this Baleful Strix. Yeah. Not a clock I particularly care about. An Orcish Bowmasters, you say? That is interesting. Right, I think we're just going to hold for a turn here. We can't play the Orcish Bowmasters because of the Dark Depths not tapping for mana. But I think I'd rather get closer to our combo, then start picking our opponent's hand up, because if they do have answers to our creature, if we like Duress and Thoughtseize now, later on down the line we try to combo, they might have drawn a bunch of cards and they might have just found another answer. Jace Reawakened. What does this one do? You can't cast it in the first 3 turns of the game. Draw a card, discard a card as a plus. You may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. So that means they can cast it as a sorcery. Until end of your turn, when you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets. Okay, people trying out the new stuff. Fair enough. Not wholly convinced by Jace Reawakened, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. Valky, God of Lies. Oh, does that work, does it? If that works that way, then obviously that's going to be horrible news for us. So what does the backside of this card do? Exile, target artifact or creature, exile all graveyards. It does a bunch of annoying stuff, is what you're saying. And there is an issue with just playing out the Hexmage now, because I can Bowmasters it. Alright, if that does work the way that it appears to, because I don't know why they'd be playing if it doesn't work that way. Alright. We know two of our opponent's cards, so I think this is safe to do. We'll get ourselves an Urborg. We'll cast this Hexmage. If our opponent fires in a Bowmaster to kill this, we kill their Jace. And then the next Hexmage gets this, because we don't just want to have this Valky taking us out. Alright. They've got a Valky. It does work the way that they errated cards to in the past to not work. Alright, so this is going to target our Hexmage, and then we're just going to remove all the counters off the Valky. And hopefully that will annoy our opponent a bunch. Like, we could have tried to risk it on the Not of This World, but not having this Valky hanging around feels like something that's worth getting rid of. Because they also have Baleful Strix, which can block and do some shenanigans too. Alright, they're drawing a card and discarding a card. Playing a swamp. If we draw a land, we get to Duress first. We did draw a land. Alright, let's tap for black. And let's Thoughtseize our opponent here. We might just see this Bowmasters coming if they haven't got any other action. A Brazen Borrower. Get out of here. Black, black. No Brazen Borrowers for you, opponent. So the text of plot is you exile it and it's in your exile zone face up, and you can cast it anytime you can play a sorcery on any future turns. So you can't play it the turn that you plot it. Alright, we have Vampire Hexmage with Not of This World backup. And we also have the Bowmasters to ping down the Strix that's blocking. Did you find yourself an answer? They're attacking with the Strix. No, they're not. Okay. Very suspicious. Maybe I just forgot, and that's fine. Oh my god, we forgot to make our guy. Speaking of forgetting. Whoopsies. Alright, so the plan here is play Pithing Needle. We're going to name Jace Reawakened. And I think we will Duress our opponent here. It's unlikely to hit here. Going to target our Hexmage. They are. We will make a 20/20 in response. They don't get a guy here. If the one card in their hand is an answer, we have the Not of This World. Unless it's Shoulder's Edict. 3 mana. What is this? Colligan's Command. So this will destroy and it'll return that to their hand. Sure. So the Duress will fail to hit this Borrower. That's fine. But we have the Not of This World. They can play the Borrower out to block. Yeah, by not making it the previous turn, we've kind of jammed ourselves up a whole bunch there that we didn't need to. Too busy talking to you lovely people. Say no. And brainstorm. Okay. They brainstorm into the answer here. I'm going to feel pretty awkward. We just made trouble for ourselves here. Alright. Marilage still alive for now. What are you doing with your Jace Reawakened? So they think they've got a turn to block. But they would be wrong. Do I think our opponent's running Daze? It doesn't hurt to play this out. Let's ping down the Strix. This also makes their Jace significantly worse. Alright, let's scoop it up. So we made a mistake. I say we, it was me obviously. So I made a mistake while I was too busy talking about layers upon layers of other stuff. And just kind of clicked through my own, through my opponent's end step instead of making the guy. Which was not ideal. It didn't matter though. Alright, let's go to sideboarding. So we've seen Brazen Borrowers. We've seen a lot of basics from our opponent. So I am suspicious that we might want these Abrupt Decays. These are also things we might be interested in. I don't really think we want any of these other bits. So I don't think our opponent's running Wastelands. So I don't think we want this Pithing Needle, although it can stop the Valky, but we should be able to play around the Valky using other measures, because that's a very slow approach, which is much slower than what we're trying to accomplish. So we get rid of these needles. I don't believe we need the Bojuka Bog. And how much do I want these Not of This World? And how much do you want fast mana? I think we can probably trim a little bit of fast mana in this situation. So let's trim a a couple of Spirit Guides, and then one Not of This World, and try this. Tamiyo Safekeeping better than Not of This World? It isn't, is it? I keep thinking about this, and it just isn't better, is it? If we're just trying to protect. Alright, we'll try this. We can always change things up. So our opponent's on a bit of a bruise, so we don't really know exactly the configuration of their deck. We can just make some assumptions based on what we've seen so far. This hand looks pretty bad, but sometimes you just windmill people with a Bowmaster to win the game, but I don't think we want to keep this one. Close, but no banana. Let's send that back. Yes, please. I will keep this. Some of these cards have got to go away. So I think we're getting rid of a Boseiju and a Catacombs. Or is it Catacombs and Bayou? If we're worried about our opponent having Blood Moon, we want 2 green sources. But that's quite a slow approach, isn't it? Alright, I think we're going to get rid of the... No, I'm going to get rid of the Bayou and the Catacombs. Polluted Delta. So I'd like some sort of removal, to be honest. Sorry, not removal, hand disruption, but we might not get that option. So we can play this Hexmage and test our opponent's hand for answers. And then we can jam the Thespian stage combo the turn after. If we play the Hexmage, we don't have to fire it off immediately either. They put 1 card on top of their library with their Surveil land, so they probably have like either a cantrip in hand or an answer to what we're doing. Thespian stage. So we can drop the Hexmage and just go for it here. It seems reasonable, given the other cards in our hand. Right, we're just in. It's Bowmasters. It is a Bowmasters. I think we do force our opponent to deal with what we're doing here. Feels like this isn't going to work though. Why would our opponent opt into that instead of just holding their mana open? They're forcing our hand, so now they've got to say, can we beat this? There's Badlands, blue and a black. This could be a Baleful Strix to block for a turn. It's the Shoulder's Edict. I suspected that would be in our opponent's arsenal. We have only 6 discard spells, so it's going to be harder to get around that, but we only need to find another Dark Depths now. We've got plenty of combo pieces over there. Alright, we have a Boseiju if we need it. Maybe our opponent isn't running Blood Moon looking at their mana base there. But we did see 2 swamps. That's a lot of swamps. Black, black. Valky, God of Lies. Each opponent exile a creature card. Choose a creature card, exile, becomes a copy. Sure. I'm going to give ourselves a swamp here. So Valky doesn't get a card from our hand, so it can't turn into a 2-2, which could potentially beat a Orcish Bowmasters. If I were trying to ping it, they could make it so it can't be pinged. Night's Whisper. An oldie but a goodie. Alright, 2 cards for you, opponent. Makes sense, their life total is not going to be going down in increments of anything other than 20, I suspect. I guess we could Bowmasters ping them as well. An Abrupt Decay. That's probably better than having this Boseiju in hand. So I'll play out our Boseiju. And then we have some options. At the very least, I want to see more of our opponent's deck so we get a better idea for sideboarding for game 3. Right, Hardcast Force of Will mana over there. If they want it. Right, just to ponder. So Crop Rotation is good. Sylvan Scrying is good. Dark Depths obviously good. So you've got, what, 4... So we've got 10 draws in 50 cards. So 1 in 5 chance, and we do have 5 turns of taking this damage without killing us anyway. Just. So we're odds on. We can always blow up one of the creatures and change the clock. I think I'd rather say this Abrupt Decay something like a Jace. Stop them getting that card selection. I thought about something. A Dark Depths. Sure, I'll play as Dark Depths out. I don't believe our opponent's running Wastelands. I'm not sure if they've got any sorcery speed stuff going on. Jace Reawakened. Sure. I don't particularly care about that one. Draw a card, discard a card. Badlands. Underground Sea. We have Brazen Borrower covered, which I think is good enough. That strikes me that our opponent doesn't have an answer, because you would attack then and get that damage through. Alright, we win the game. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of our opponent's deck. There's some interesting stuff going there. I suspect we'll see other people doing this sort of thing now that I know that this Jace Valky combo works. But we are 3-1. So let's go to the final round and see if we can get that 4-1. So this hand just wants us to find tutors or our pieces. We have this Bowmasters. This is sort of hand where you can keep and it never goes anywhere. I think we can do better. You're right. This is pretty good. This is a 1, 2, cast this, crop rotate. Okay, yeah. This is a turn 1, 2020, which is pretty good. City of Traitors. 3 mana. Rabblemaster. Okay. Do you know what beats a turn 1 Rabblemaster? Is a turn 1 2020. So we can play Swamp Petal to do this. Go black, black. And we can do this at instant speed so our opponent doesn't know it's coming. They might just think we're trying to block their Rabblemaster and keep it at bay. And they're basically a tap out deck for the most part. So we're going to see it something here and then we can react to it. Passionate Mons. Whenever a Passionate Mons or another goblin you control dies. Sure. And let's just put our opponent out of their misery now. Alright, our opponent's scooping. So, this looks like goblins because they have the Passionate Mons. I would very much like to have some Abrupt Decays in for this matchup. Other cards that seem useful, basically none. Tamiyo Safekeeping potentially does stuff, as does Karakas, but I'm not really in love with these cards. So Pithing Needle isn't great. It can sometimes stop a Bombardier's doing stuff, but I don't think that's where I want to be. We definitely don't need the Bojuka Bog, so if we're just taking out the bad cards, then we're working out what we keep in. We want to keep all our fast mana because this could be a matchup that requires us to go quick. Only having 3 Abrupt Decay instead of 4 could come back to bite us down the line. Do we want to play 1 Karakas to like bounce a Passionate Mons or Muxus? Or do I want to play a Tamiyo Safekeeping? I don't think so. We could play just 1 Pithing Needle for Bombardiers, and that's reasonable. I don't think they're a vile build either. We don't have to worry about protecting our creature. Sphere is interesting here, but I don't think it's good enough. Like, our opponent's got loads of soul lands and stuff. But on the play, if you can play it on turn 1, it can do some work, but I don't think that's where we're at. So if we think our opponent's mulliganing to Blood Moon, this hand is pretty good. I'm going to keep this one. I'd like to demonstrate how we play against Blood Moon. If I just play it turn 1, then we're kind of in trouble. Chalice for 1. Doesn't impact our hand right now. Right, so we play out the Urborg. Or do we play out this? We play out the Catacombs. It makes us slower. But it just guarantees that we can always cast this Abrupt Decay instead of having to float mana off the Urborg to do it. There is a mountain. A Name Sticker Goblin. We could kill this. That is the thing we're allowed to try and do. I don't think we're going to. Because if you kill it in response to the trigger. Alright, so this is exactly what I was talking about. So we crack this for a swamp. And now our opponent's just given us the combo. Which is why I kept this hand. So then we play this Dark Depths. Play this Lotus Petal. Pass. And then whenever we want, we just Abrupt Decay this. Make a 20/20. I think it's actually a mistake for Goblin decks to try and board in Blood Moon a lot of the time against the Turbodepths. If they just do their really fast aggro hand, it usually wins. Well, not usually wins, but it usually wins more than this hand. Because they've got a hand that was a lot slower and didn't really do anything they needed it to. So black, green, and then this will trigger now. Yep. Alright, so we put up a 4-1 there, so that felt pretty good. I think there's some good stuff to talk about here, so let's just jump right into it. So obviously the big thing that we're looking at with this deck is the Orcish Bowmasters, right? That's basically the main difference here. We're going down on tutors to fit in a Bowmaster, basically. And, you know, a few other bits and pieces. You know, we've got less needles, we've got less whatever, or less Elvish Reclaimer and less lands, if we're looking at it that way. So what did the Orcish Bowmaster actually do this league? It didn't really do much. Like, it killed a Baleful Strix, which let us advance for a turn. You know, that let us kill them that turn rather than allowing them to potentially draw. So that's reasonable. It didn't really buy us time in any matchups, but it had the potential to do that. It didn't ever, like, beat down and win the game. It did force out a counterspell from a Delver player, but in that particular hand, we didn't actually need to resolve any spells to win that game. So I'm not really convinced that Orcish Bowmasters helps here, but there's no denying Orcish Bowmasters is a very good card. I'm not necessarily sure how much it adds to what we're trying to accomplish with our deck. And some of the costs that we're paying to get this are a little bit steep. So we have less lands than I would normally play. I would normally have 1 more Boseiju and 1 Yawgmoth in here. And that gives us a lot more green sources. And if you're trying to play things like Tamiyo Safekeeping out the sideboard, having more green sources is kind of important in my opinion. Like I don't think this build is bad at all. But imagine if this was an Elvish Reclaimer. Obviously, you know, I'm a bit biased. I love Elvish Reclaimer. But the Elvish Reclaimer would basically be a must-answer threat for our opponent. So that can draw counter spells or whatever as well, or Source of Plowshares. But then also on its own, it will assemble your combo after a few turns. And that is just a really powerful thing to be able to do. And it just gives us more access to hate pieces like Bojuka Bog, which is also another nice one. So I'm not convinced. Like, obviously, this is just a great card, and I don't need to tell people that Orcish Bowmasters is a powerful Magic card. Like, that's a known quantity at this point. However, does it belong in every deck? So, like, Cradle Control decks aren't even running Orcish Bowmasters at the moment, a lot of them, because they have stuff that works with their plan better. And I'm not convinced that Orcish Bowmasters works with our plan as much as having something like a Reclaimer would. Or, you know, having some more lands. Like, if we were just to cut these for, let's say, put in 2 lands, 2 Reclaimers. Or, like, even just 1 land. Even just a Yavimaya and 3 Reclaimers. I think that would be a better list. Obviously, that's closer to what I'm running at the moment. And I'm slightly biased because, you know, it's a deck I've been working on and stuff. But I think the Orcish Bowmaster doesn't really add anything. But at the same point, there are matchups like Doomsday that are hard for us. And Orcish Bowmasters can be a useful tool in that sort of matchup. So there's definitely some push and pull. But we're not really trying to chip our opponent's life total down. So our Orcish Bowmaster, if it hits our opponent for 15, it's kind of the same as it hitting them for 1 a lot of the time. Because, like, unless it's hitting them for the full 20, it doesn't really matter, if that makes sense. Because the other things that we're using to win the game with will hit our opponent for 20 in one go. So it's not bad about, like, chipping down if somebody's gained a little bit of life, and you can maybe, you know, get a cheap shot in and stop them from getting Uro life to put themselves over 20. That's a possibility. But I'm just not really sure it convinces me at all and doesn't really play into the game plan. What I will say, though, this build feels much better than the sort of hybrid deck. So there's a hybrid deck that I played on the channel a while ago that was sort of green-black sort of scam with, you know, the Hexmage combo and all that. So that was like this, except I think we cut these things in order to make room for, like, trolls and griefs, and we had reanimates as well. So maybe we cut some tutors. So we might have cut, like, all of this sort of stuff to add some reanimates and griefs and trolls. And all that achieved, in my opinion, was playing a worse scam deck and a worse depths deck. You need the meat to make your depths work. You know, you need to have a bulk of cards to defend against stuff, because, you know, it's a known thing that people are doing out here in Legacy, and people will have answers for you, and you will need to have your Pithing Needles, your Not of This World, or just extra tutors so you can go and find that Ghost Quarter to beat a Wasteland or whatever. So there's all those options that you need to really have to make this deck work, because it's quite linear. Now, if you've got a deck that's only got, like, 2 Dark Depths in, and you're not really leaning into it, fair enough. But as soon as you've got 4 Dark Depths in your deck, and you're leaning into Hex Mages and stuff like that, you do need to have the support. And I just don't think you can do what the green-black scam depths did. So this build is definitely better than that. It's much closer to an all-in depths deck. And the Orcish Bowmaster is kind of like a bit of a utility piece. Weirdly, if Orcish Bowmasters wasn't in the format, Orcish Bowmasters would be better in this deck. Allow me to explain what I mean. So before Orcish Bowmasters came around, people were playing Icefang Coatl, and Baleful Strix. These were quite common cards to see in Legacy. Since Orcish Bowmaster has come out, those cards have basically disappeared. Now, what those cards did that was annoying for us sometimes, would they would be able to block for a turn. So they would buy our opponent 1 turn of the game, which meant that they could then dig for another turn. It also turned on sorcery speed removal, like Prismatic Ending, which was very heavily played back then as well. And that would then, you know, snowball into them winning. It would also turn on Teferi as an answer to Marit Lage. So we kind of just have a whole bunch of problems if they were blocking. So in a format without Orcish Bowmaster, where people are playing those, having a thing that would ping these things for 1 would actually be quite useful. But I think in this current format, the reason why Depths is so good right now is because of Orcish Bowmasters, right? Because Orcish Bowmasters doesn't really impact our deck at all. We kind of just ignore it. But what it does do is it removes some stuff that does impact our deck, you know. It's made black a colour that people are reaching for more, which means less Swords to Plowshares in the format than there have been previously. So, like, the Bug Beanstalk deck beats out the Bant-flavoured control decks. So you end up with the way that Bowmasters has warped the format has actually been positive for our deck. Although some people would obviously be unhappy with that. But it's pretty good for me because I love jamming 2020s into people's face. So yeah, I think I've gone into quite a lot of detail about this particular build and some of my concerns and things I like about it. It was interesting that we only had 3 Sylvan Scrying, but it didn't feel like we were desperate for tutors that much. So that is a potential thing that we might be able to trim on in like the more stock list. Maybe we can just have 3 Reclaimer, 3 Sylvan Scrying, 4 Crop Rots, and that gives us a little bit more room to interact with our opponent. That's certainly something to think about, and I'll obviously be messing around with it, but hopefully I'll be playing some cards from the new set for the next few leagues. I've got a lot of ideas lined up, so be prepared for some wild things. A little quick chat about the sideboard. I think the tools were fine, but what I will say is Tamiyo Safekeeping. 1 mana is quite a lot sometimes in this deck. And 1 green mana was definitely a thing that we got gated on a few times. We don't have a Yawgmoth to help out, and the extra Boseiju that I like to run to help with these green costs and things, we didn't have that either. So sometimes we were boarding in Tamiyo Safekeeping and looking at it, and it wasn't really doing what we wanted it to. And again, I'm not really a fan of Karakas, because I think if you're ever tutoring for Karakas, you're probably just losing slower than actually winning the game. Now, there's obviously situations where that isn't the case, but that's my general philosophy. I'd rather have something like Collector Roof in that slot and just hate on the artifact decks that can outrace us, because, you know, the Epic Storm and the dual combo deck, stuff like that, they can race us. So having a bit of hatred for that works. It's also nice against the 8-cast decks to just shut them down and stop them snowballing, and then just lets you sort of go off in your own leisure. So this isn't quite where I would be at with the sideboard either. But if you want to read more about that and my thoughts on this deck, boy howdy do I have a place for you. If you just go down to the description and click on my Patreon link, I do a regular, so once a month I update the guide to Green-Black Turbodepths. It's not just Green-Black Turbodepths, it's Rainbow Depths and Green-Black Turbodepths, because there's a slight difference between them, and I sort of discuss that at length. But then there's also like a big section at the start of it which discusses the current meta, current trends in decks, win percentage, meta percentages in all the data we have, as well as looking at like the top data from challenges and things, and just seeing where Depths fits in, how the meta is changing, what we need to do. And I always post like the current list I'm playing at the time. So if you're into Turbodepths, by all means check it out. But as long as you just keep watching my content and enjoying it, that's all that really matters to me. So remember to like and subscribe, and I will bid you all goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. Ta-ra. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget Turbodepths, as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed Turbodepths guide that is updated every month, as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.